We participate in hundreds of online experiments without even knowing it. In the name of improving their apps and making more money, tech companies test things as harmless as testing which color buttons people like better, to much more dangerous experiments, like seeing if they can manipulate people's real-world actions with their apps. And what's most crazy is this is legal. But should it be? To dig into this, we decided to show a variety of online experiments to an expert.
I am Leigh Hall. I was a professor for 17 years, and currently I am the director of research for an educational technology company.
To understand why Leigh was the perfect expert for this, you have to understand a little bit about the history of psychological experiments. For a long time, there were no rules about experimenting on humans. But then, in the 1970s, some experiments got really out of control. For instance, a 1971 study called the Stanford Prison Experiment caused an uproar because it turned out that when participants were put in a simulated prison environment, they started torturing each other and causing severe psychological distress.
I had really thought that I was incapable of this kind of behavior.
After a series of these experiments went really wrong, the US government mandated that all experiments involving humans had to be approved by an Institutional Review Board, or IRB, which basically is just a separate committee of unbiased people who make sure research is done ethically. They ensure that before a study begins, 1, participants are informed of the risks and benefits of being involved. 2, participants won't be harmed significantly by the research. And 3, participants aren't exploited in the process. But there's a catch. See, IRB rules only apply to research done using federal funding, like research done at universities. Private companies are exempt. That means all websites and apps run by private companies can conduct experiments on millions of internet users with no oversight. And this is why we asked Leigh for help. As a professor, Leigh had to ensure all her research passed IRB standards. She even made a YouTube channel to help others perform their research more ethically.
In this video, we're going to be talking about how you get IRB approval.
But then, after 17 years, she switched to a role directing research for a tech company. We showed her 6 publicly documented experiments that tech companies have run, to see if even just the ones the public knows about are ethical. We started with an experiment by LinkedIn.
All right.
Experimenters wanted to test the weak ties social theory on the business and employment platform LinkedIn. The theory suggests that the people you kinda know, but aren't super close with, might be able to help you find a job easier than close friends or family could. To test this out, they ran a large-scale randomized experiment using the LinkedIn feature called People You May Know. The researchers tinkered with this feature from 2000.
Okay, so they're gonna, if I'm on LinkedIn, and I am on LinkedIn, so basically with this study, they're gonna show me people I might know, and hope that I connect with them, to then see if it leads to me getting a different job, a better job, something that I'm somehow happier with. Yeah. Okay, and it's randomized control, but I don't know, correct, that I'm in this study? All right, we'll keep playing.
From 2015 to 2019, affecting over 20 million people's profiles. They randomly varied how often close friends, or strong ties, and acquaintances, or weak ties, showed up as suggested connections. So what did they find? They found that there was causal evidence to support that weak ties did affect employment opportunities. The study also showed that the impact of these connections varied depending on the industry you work in. In simple terms, having some weak connections can be really helpful for finding job opportunities, but the effect can depend on the type of industry you're in.
Okay. So, did people consent to this? Because I'm guessing it doesn't say that they did, but it also doesn't say that they didn't.
So, LinkedIn's privacy policy during this experiment stated that LinkedIn uses data to conduct research. Do you think that when users sign up to LinkedIn and agree to this policy that constitutes informed consent?
No. Because I was probably a part of this experiment. To give informed consent, I need to know what the risks are. If my profile's not being shown, then I may experience some negative effects from that. I should know the advantages and disadvantages that can come out of being a participant in this study. To say, hey, we're gonna use your data to conduct research and make this a better experience for you, it kind of whitewashes what's going on in between that.
So we thought that one was actually pretty mild, but she didn't even think that was ethical. But what happens when an experiment affects your wallet? We are ready.
Okay.
Researchers wanted to see what would happen if StubHub used a drip pricing strategy. This is where the company doesn't show you extra fees until you're just about to pay. Before the study, StubHub showed you the total price, including all fees, up front. For the experiment, they randomly divided users into two groups. Half of the customers saw the full price up front, while the other half only saw the extra fees at the very end when they were just about to pay. This test ran for about 2 weeks in 2015 and involved millions of customers. What they found was pretty interesting. The drip pricing strategy led to a 21% increase in the company's revenue. While some people dropped out of buying tickets when they saw the added fees, enough people completed their purchases to more than make up for it. Because of these findings, StubHub decided to go back on their original policy of showing all the fees up front and continued with the drip pricing strategy, revealing the extra fees only at the checkout stage.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Does this raise any ethical concerns?
No, I mean, you might experience some annoyance. That's how I would feel. Like if I was in the group and then I got to the end, they got to the pricing at all the pricing at the end, and I'm like, oh, there's this $24 fulfillment and service fee. Well, that's annoying, right? Like I wish they had told me that sooner. But you see the total. It's not like you paid for it and then surprise we tack something on after the fact. You might have been pushed a little bit, but I make the final decision. But yeah, I don't know I'm a part of an experiment that's serving to make them money. I generally think that if I'm going to be part of an experiment that goes beyond you just looking at the analytics of how your platform is being used, I feel like I should be told.
Honestly, we were actually really surprised she didn't find this one as bad because it feels really manipulative. But the next one definitely gets more questionable.
Researchers wanted to see how emotional contagion works online. Emotional contagion is the idea that moods can spread from person to person. And while we do know it's something that can happen in face-to-face situations, they wanted to find out if this emotional spreading can happen even if you're not directly interacting with someone, like when you're just scrolling through your Facebook news feed. In 2012, they adjusted what over 600,000 people saw on their Facebook pages for a week. Some folks saw fewer happy posts, while others saw fewer sad or angry ones. Then, the researchers checked what these people were posting to see if their mood had changed. What they found was that online emotional contagion is definitely a thing. If your feed had fewer happy posts, you were more likely to post things that were sad or angry. If your feed had fewer sad or angry posts, you ended up posting happier stuff. And if you saw fewer emotional posts in general, you were less likely to post emotional things at all.
Wow, okay. I'm just sitting here, I'm just thinking about 600,000 people got manipulated with their emotions. They did not consent to that. I do not care what the privacy policy says. We're gonna see, like, can I make you more happy? Can I make you more sad? Can I make you more angry? And you don't know anything about the emotional health of the people that you're doing this to. Like, I feel gross. I wouldn't necessarily, even as a participant, an unknowing participant, recognize, oh, hey, maybe it's because I'm in that Facebook study. Maybe they are showing me things. Maybe I need to stop. I think it could do serious harm.
One bioethicist argued that no harm was done because what users did or didn't see fell within the realm of their regular Facebook experience.
No,
Do you agree with that?
I don't know how they can say they didn't do any harm because they don't know. They don't know. They didn't check for that, and these 600,000 people didn't know they were in it. So how are these people going to be able to report if there was any harm?
Yeah.
I get the point. This is in your thread to begin with. This is in your feed. You could have seen it anyways, but they prioritized it based on what group you were in. So your feed's being manipulated. Yeah. So I don't care if you're trying to manipulate them positively. They did not opt into this. They can, and because they didn't opt into it, they can't opt out of it. I don't know how this isn't a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Was this a lawsuit?
So after this research came out, there was a massive backlash. Because of this backlash, the journal it was published in added a correction. Facebook was a private company that didn't have to conform to ethical rules.
Well, wait a minute. Just take Facebook out of the equation for a minute. Just private company that doesn't have to conform to ethical rules. Everybody watching this should have a problem with that statement.
So one of the researchers stated that the motivation behind the research was, we care about the emotional impact of Facebook and the people that use our product.
But
at the same time, we were concerned that exposure to friends' negativity might lead people to avoid visiting Facebook.
Oh, so this is about how can we get people to keep coming to Facebook? This, at the end of the day, this isn't about like how it really affects you, that's not an argument for doing this kind of a study. I mean, I think there is something to understand societally about how emotions can get spread. That's not what they're looking at here. They're looking at, hey, can we affect your mood in some way? And then if we affect your mood in certain ways, are you more or less likely to stay on Facebook? It's all about them. That's a high price to pay as a user.
Obviously, intentionally manipulating tons of people's emotions is dangerous, but even more importantly, it demonstrates that these companies have tremendous power to influence us. Wouldn't that influence be even more dangerous for things like voting? Let's go.
Facebook again.
Researchers wanted to know if seeing messages on Facebook could make people more likely to vote. To test this, they ran an experiment on the day of US congressional elections in 2010. All US adults who logged into Facebook that day were part of the study. Some people saw a message at the top of their Facebook feed encouraging them to vote. The message also had other stuff, like a link to find where to vote, and a counter showing how many people had clicked that button. There was a twist for some users. They not only saw the message, but also saw pictures of up to 6 of their friends who had clicked the I voted button. The idea was to see if adding a social element, like showing friends who voted, would make a difference in encouraging people to vote. They found out the people who saw the I voted message were more likely to vote compared to those who didn't see any message. People who saw their friends' pictures along with the message were even more likely to vote. They also figured out who among a user's Facebook friends were particularly close friends. Showing the voting message along with pictures of close friends made people even more likely to vote in real life. In the end, they estimated that their Facebook experiment got an extra 60,000 people to vote directly and influenced another 280,000 people to vote through the ripple effect of social influence, adding up to 340,000 extra votes.
That one's interesting. That's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Okay, so we're all in this study. I mean, it's always going to raise a concern for me because I don't think you should be in a study unless you agree to be in a study.
Okay.
So that's always going to be a problem for me. Like, and I don't care about the user agreement.
So does it change the ethics of something if you are encouraging them to do something that's technically considered a public good?
That's a really good question for me because, like, as an academic, you think about, okay, what's the problem that we're trying to solve? And so I immediately put this into a box. Yeah. What's the problem? Oh, the problem is people don't vote in high numbers as they should. How can we solve that? Can we use social media in a way that promotes something good that helps us solve this problem? Yeah. But then that raises another question of, do we have the business of doing that? Should social media companies be using their platform to try to manipulate people to do things, even if those things that people are being manipulated for are good for them or good for the society? I'm going to say no.
So, that particular experiment ended up being more mild, but it's because we chose to show her only well-documented cases. We limited ourselves to cases where the details of how they actually set up the experiment were public. So yeah, in this experiment, they didn't try to influence the election one way or the other. They just tried to get more people to vote. But if you're not already aware, this power has been misused to influence election results. One example was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where it was proven that Cambridge Analytica used Facebook to collect millions of users' personal information without their consent. And then they used this information to influence both the Brexit election in the UK and the 2016 US presidential election. No matter who you voted for, it's pretty terrifying that companies with no oversight have this kind of power. But even if you put aside like huge democracy scale issues like this, what about how experiments can affect our most intimate relationships? What about dating apps?
All right, let's see what they did to these poor people.
OkCupid is a dating website and app that started in 2004. People fill out quizzes about their likes and dislikes, such as favorite movies or political views. The app then suggests potential dates based on how well their answers match up. Users can see this match rating and decide if they want to message someone. OkCupid had found that the algorithm was effective at predicting relationships, but they wanted to find out whether this was because of the quality of their algorithm or whether people were influenced by the display of the compatibility rating. So in 2014, they did an experiment. They showed some people false match ratings. They took pairs of users who were actually a bad match, like 30% compatible, and told them they were a great match, like 90% compatible. They also did the opposite. They took pairs who were a good match and told them they were a bad match. The results? When people saw a high match rating, they were not only more likely to send the first message, but also more likely to keep the conversation going. If people saw a low match rating, even if they were actually a good match, they were less likely to keep talking. Although the odds of a continued conversation were the highest when the true and displayed compatibility ratings matched, they found the displayed compatibility had an effect on whether or not users both started and continued conversations.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
This is a trust issue, right? And it's super deceptive. It's not what I signed up for. Yeah. I'm surprised they did this, actually. I mean, you could end up with people quitting the platform, right? Because you're being told this is good and it's not, and then you meet this person or whatever, and you're just like, I don't get how this was ever a match. And then if you do it again, right?
This experiment was interesting because unlike the other ones we talked about so far, this was the only one that didn't involve any academic researchers.
Okay.
And it was not published or...
Right. It's just internal.
Yeah, it was just internal. So do private companies need to have their research approved by any governing bodies?
Oh, that is such a good question. I mean, right now we don't. And you can see what some of the consequences are from that. And there's probably a lot more that we just don't know about. Like, what would it mean if every time we did a research study, we had to get IRB approval? Things would move a lot slower. I think that would be the pushback, right, that you would get from industry is like if you had to run it through kind of like that existing process, it would slow everything way down. I mean, right now, my assumption is who's holding them accountable is their legal department. And their legal department said, based on whatever your user agreement is and yada, yada, this is fine. You are legally allowed to do this. But you can sort of see like the legal department, who's the legal department work for, right? They're there to make sure the company doesn't mess up and that the company doesn't do anything that could get them sued, right? But I don't think this is ethical, but it's still legal. Right? So just because it's legal doesn't mean that they should be doing it. And right now, that's the only accountability in place is the lawyers.
As you can imagine, from the stating one to the voting one to the emotion manipulation, there was a huge blowback when these experiments were revealed. Some people started suggesting that maybe all companies should be required to have IRB systems. Or some creative ideas like maybe there should be certifications or licenses, kind of like certified organic foods, so we can tell which products are risky or not. So there are some small certifications that exist, but since nothing official has been widely implemented yet, some big companies have actually started using IRB processes in their experiments to try and demonstrate that they're being more ethical. Of course, there's still no laws, so there's not really a way of knowing whether this is just a publicity stunt or if they're actually doing this for all their experiments now. Either way, we wanted to end on a little bit more of a positive note with an experiment that was done attempting to use all of the IRB rules.
All right, ready?
Yep.
All right.
For the 2020 election, the company that owns Facebook, called Meta, worked with outside experts to learn more about how Facebook and Instagram affected people's thoughts and actions related to politics during election time. The people who took part in these studies were asked for explicit informed consent to participate, separate from the usual terms of service. Meta's own researchers collaborated with these outside experts to plan the studies, but neither Meta nor its researchers had the power to control the results. These outside experts weren't paid by Meta. The consent language, along with the studies, were approved by an institutional review board to make sure the study was conducted ethically. 4 studies have been published so far, with the intention of 16 total papers to be published. In these initial 4 studies, researchers analyzed people's exposure to the news, as well as to untrustworthy websites. Organized the feed chronologically rather than by algorithm to see what impact that had, and reduced some of the content people saw in their feeds to study the impact of echo chambers.
It's certainly better, at least on the surface, right?
What was working here that they hadn't done in the past?
You have informed consent. People knew what was going on.
Yeah.
So I assume if I can opt in, I can opt out. That's my assumption. If not, that's a ding. But they found an expert, right, that collaborated with them. They didn't pay them, so that's good. Because then you don't have that conflict of interest. They went through an IRB board. So I think that's something like when you see Facebook or anybody and they went through an IRB procedure, not that IRB is perfect, But I think it does give it a higher level of trust because you've got this independent outside entity that's not going to benefit at all, right? If this research goes well, they're not going to get any financial gain.
So is this really like as compliant as it gets?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having a hard time critiquing this one.
Great. Out of all the experiments we just talked about, can you rate them most ethical to least ethical?
Facebook, that last one, where they had the explicit consent and they're looking at how does Facebook, okay, the way they did that, I put that as the most ethical. Least ethical, I put the Facebook emotional contagion.
Yeah.
I think because you're playing with people's emotions, you don't know who those people are, you don't know what their mental state is when they came in. That's pretty bad. And then everything else is kind of like a mishmash in between, right? So LinkedIn, I put LinkedIn, then I put OkCupid, then I did Facebook voting, then I did StubHub.
We have this quote that says, guess what, everybody? If you use the internet, you're subject to hundreds of experiments at any given time on every site. That's how websites work.
Yep.
So do you agree that we should just get used to this?
No.
Is this how things should be?
No, I don't think we should, right? Because then you end up with some of the things that we saw here today. I have seen, right, the loss of privacy, how it gets chipped away. If you were born today, this is just normal for you. And so my concern is, right, like the people that are coming up, that this has always been the way that it was since they were born, aren't going to know to question it or push back on it because it's going to seem like this is the way that the world works. And the world didn't used to work like this. It's just gotten more this way. How far do you push this line? And if you're not okay with this, even one of these things, and you're not going to be okay with where the line moves to 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And you might just think it doesn't affect you, but it's bigger than one person, right? You have the right to know that somebody is trying to manipulate you and change you in order to get data from you that, by and large, serves the company.
What role do you see lack of privacy playing in the level of experimentation that's happening?
Well, I mean, it makes it easier, right? Like the less privacy you have, the more that these companies are let into your life to take information and do as they please. And that should really scare you, right? I guess my closing thought is this is a pattern and we're not aware of it and we're participating in it all the time. Right now, if, for anybody that's watching, is you have to develop an awareness of this and decide where your lines are and what you're okay with and what you're not okay with, because getting off of like all of this stuff is not going to be an option. So to what extent are you willing to put up with things, and to what point are you willing to put up with things? But I do think your ideas about like, do we need a license? Do we need some kind of accountability to people that are to these companies that are doing research on us? Yeah, we do. That's how we got to IRB in the first place, right? Because there wasn't accountability for researchers in universities, right? They could just go and do their research. Problems started happening, and then now we have IRB. So now there is a degree of accountability. So I think maybe that's just where we are now with this.